Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today we've got a real treat. Kate Sasenko, all the way from London, England. She is founder of The Good Busy, where she helps people get good busy so you can make time for what matters most. I know that this is a topic that anybody in this planet would want to take advantage of. There are so many questions we have for you. Can't wait to get started. But first, thanks for joining us today, Kate.
Thanks so much for having me, both of you. Thank you.
My pleasure. First question I always like to ask our guests is tell us a little bit about your journey and how you got here. I'm really curious about how someone wanted to get into this business of time and what that looks like now.
Business of time. I never thought I was in the business of time, but yeah, I might use that in the future. So, I was playing sports. I was playing sports for 10 years when I was younger. And I think that that's how I sort of got into being busy as a child overall. So I was constantly doing something. I was on the court or sort of doing the physio. And, when I was 11 years old, I was in a professional tennis academy where I trained 6 hours a day. So I would wake up at 7, have breakfast, go to the academy, start training, then get some rest, then in the afternoon train again, then go to school and come back home at 10 p.m. So for a normal adult, that's a very, very busy day, right? And nobody wants to have that day, but I had it as a child and I enjoyed it. I loved it. So I never thought of the word busy as something negative. And I think that it's only when I actually got into corporate, so in my 20s, I was extremely busy because I was trying to do everything. And I was trying to fit everything in, which was, now I understand it was impossible. And then later on, when I sort of explored this notion of time and productivity and how it works, I understood that productivity is not about achieving and succeeding in everything. It's about achieving and succeeding in what matters. And so I started being picky, right? I started saying no to things. I started to be very intentional what I say yes to. I asked much more questions than I did in my 20s. In my 20s, I used to talk. It's just, I do, I take, and in my 30s, I was much more mindful of pausing and sort of asking a lot of questions before I talk. And that's how I got there. So I was in corporate for 15 years. My background is in client relationship management and client experience. I trained salespeople and marketing people, so I loved training. And 5 years ago, a manager introduced me to coaching. And because coaching sounded familiar because of my sports background, but here I was sort of talking about executive coaching and I loved it. So I got a degree in coaching. I got an education, so I'm an accredited coach. And then I moved out of the corporate world to start sort of my own journey. And I chose productivity because I'm sort of, an organization freak. I love and I value time a lot as well. I also think that we sometimes we have this overly confidence that we have a lot of time, ahead. And experiences in my life taught me that we don't, unfortunately. So I learned to value time much more than I value money. And that's what I think actually makes people productive when they start valuing time much more than they value money. So here I am.
How many people, though, struggle putting a dollar amount on their hourly rate or their time per se? Because not everybody charges per hour like some of us. How do you help people with that? Because I find that so many people don't understand what their actual time is worth. And some people look at that and they're like, what do you even mean? What is my time worth? That's just something coaches say.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. So I think that the reason people don't understand how much their time worth is because they don't see it. So more than 80% of our actions are driven by our eyes, by visual clues. And so that's why we value money more than time, because we can see money, we can touch money, and we get rewarded with money. So many people, if you look, I mean, they all have bank accounts, right? At the end of the month, they receive their bank statement. So they look how they spend their money. So immediately they say, oh, I shouldn't be spending on this. I shouldn't be doing this. Next time, I should be more mindful with this. But we don't have this approach with time. So it's very hard for people to put sort of, the price on their time. And I think that when they get to the point where they know the price is where the questions will health kick in, so they start, for example, feeling that, okay, something is wrong, we're getting close to the burnout, or we're missing out time with family. So that's where the real value in those questions start to pop up. But until we get there, we sort of don't know exactly how much our time is worth.
It's okay. One of the things with time, even as people look at it, I feel like a lot of times people can't get out of the hamster wheel, right? So they're running really fast, and they feel like if they slow down at all, they're not going to be able to accomplish what they're accomplishing. And they probably know they are on the hamster wheel, but they just have no idea how to even just step out for a second to try to slow it down and to your point, focus on the right things. How do you see people kind of getting out of that hamster wheel and to just kind of take that second to reflect a little bit on what actually am I doing?
Yeah, so when I was playing tennis, when you kind of are in the sports, every single time after the training or the match, my coach taught me to replay, so to reflect. What did I do well? What didn't I do well? And that became sort of a habit that I built since I was little. And I think that we don't do that enough. And that's why many people are on the hamster wheel, because they continue doing things because they think, I'm not productive, so I need to do more. But they continue doing more things that don't bring any results, don't bring any outcome. And that's why they continue to be on that hamster wheel, right? So interestingly, when I was working in Thailand, I was working for one of the luxury resorts, and the philosophy there was slow life. And that's exactly where I learned how to slow down. And I understood that productivity, and Cal Newport talks a lot about it, it's slow productivity. So productivity is actually doing less. It's actually knowing what to stop doing and when to stop doing, because we can achieve better quality. Productivity is about quality, it's not about quantity. So when we learn and we focus on doing less things, we actually deliver better quality. So that's the 80-20 rule, right? And we actually have time to breathe, and we have time to reflect, we have time to replay. So this is how I learned. And it's interesting, like when I was working in the resort, I remember guests arriving to the resort, and we would ask them to take off their shoes so that they can sort of, be grounded. And then we asked them not to turn on the phone, at least for the time that they were in the resort. So the whole idea was just enjoy, the reflection time, enjoy being here, enjoy being in the now, enjoy, anything you want. The reason you came here is not to be on your phone. That was kind of the reminder as well. So this was really the philosophy that taught me a lot. And I think that one of the proudest projects in my life was done in that company. I achieved it. I practically never worked overtime in that company, never. But I achieved a lot.
So, Kate, one of the things, what I'm hearing you say there is less is more. And I come from a marketing background where a lot of people try to fill up a web page with way too much text. And I've not only come to the conclusion for myself years ago, but I found it to be more impactful when you say less. Choose fewer words can make a bigger impact than trying to use more words, which oftentimes people say, I won't even bother reading that. So you don't have the opportunity to make effect and an impact, I should say. But do you believe that less is more? Is this something you help your clients with?
100%. We're doing too much, actually. Every time I realized that I was doing too much, it was every time I resigned. Because when you resign and you decide to leave, you stop doing many things that you were doing before, right? Because you're like, I'm not staying. I mean, we need to be honest with ourselves. At least it happened to me every single time. So that's how I learned that 50% of the workload I was putting on myself. And that was not all valuable workload. There was a lot of work that was absolutely worthless. So one of
But Kate,
yeah, go ahead.
People wear this busy as a badge of honor. So they often say, well, yeah, I'm doing more. I'm busy. I'm busy. I'm doing more. So not only is it maybe something in their head, like a mentality saying, yeah, this is good, right? I'm busy. I'm always doing stuff. I'm working toward it. But probably half of what they're doing, as you say, may not be aligned with their goals and objectives.
Yeah, because many people don't know their goals. Most of the time when I work with people, they know exactly what's happening and what they don't want, what's happening right now. But when I ask them, so what do you want? That's where the big pause happens. Many people simply don't know what they want because it doesn't necessarily mean the opposite. So they've never paused to actually ask themselves one question. If I don't want this, what do I want and how do I get there? Right? So, and to your point, Chris, about being busy, I think there's a lot of, call it group thinking or bandwagon effect in corporate, right? Athletes, I'll always give a lot of examples with sports because of my background in sports, but think of athletes, right? Aren't they busy? Why aren't they complaining about being busy? I mean, those, I can tell you, I train 6 hours a day. I can tell you
Yeah.
that's being busy. And I don't know if you're going to, enjoy a game with somebody who's texting at the same time, right? It wouldn't be the same game. But the fact is that the busy is not a bad word. It's because we made it busy. The difference between athletes being busy and between people in corporate being busy is that athletes are monotasking. They're focusing on one task. And we are in corporate, we're multitasking. And multitasking overwhelms us. So that's the huge difference. And because a lot of people were talking about busy being bad, especially on LinkedIn, where I'm very present, I went and researched it. Busy is not bad. It's just a simple word. Doctor is busy with a patient. It means that he's working, right? So that's it. That's all it means. Busy means dedicating full attention and full effort to one activity. It means not being able to take on something else because you're already doing something else. So it's a pure definition of monotasking. But because we turned it into multitasking to feel important, right? Or because of the misconception of productivity, because we need to do more, now we're kind of paying the price for it. But in reality, it's not a badge of honor. But I must say that I absolutely agree that being busy doesn't mean being productive, but to be productive, you need to get busy. It's just the how that's different.
Yeah.
You bet. You said something there that I think is so critical. Monotasking versus multitasking. I know one of the things we've talked about here is people talk about multitasking all the time. They're not actually multitasking. They're actually task jumping. And so they end up never actually getting anywhere because it's, well, I'm going to spend 3 minutes here and 3 minutes here. And we know that the typical person's going to take you 17 minutes to basically get into the flow of something, right? And so if you're task jumping, you're actually not doing anything. you're going laterally back and forth. And so to your point of the athletes monotasking, and that's really why, to your point, I guess I've never thought of it that way, of how they don't complain about them being busy.
Yeah.
Yet they're pretty busy.
Yeah.
they're traveling, they're working out, they're eating perfect. They're doing a lot of things to be busy. I think that's a really good distinction.
Yeah. I think it's the same.
Kate,
Just think about, yeah, sorry. Just wanted to add on the same on musicians, actors, everybody thrives on being busy. It's just the corporate world that sort of is not embracing it.
This really aligns well with something Dustin and I talk a lot about. Having a business and a podcast that has the word hustle in it, you'd think that for many people that's a good thing, right? Hustle being productivity, being something that you coach and teach youth in sports today to get to a level of success. However, hustle carries a negative connotation in several categories and in several parts of the world. And so when we talk about hustle, people say, well, what you're suggesting is working 60 hours a week, and that creates burnout. And a lot of people who are hustling aren't eating well. They're not taking care of themselves. They're not maybe being present with their family or their spouses, people in their life. And so it's very interesting to me that hustle carries these negative connotations, where at the end of the day, part of what we're trying to do is similar to what you're trying to do, is really just enhance productivity. We don't necessarily believe you need to work 60 hours a week. We just believe that you need to enhance your productivity by focusing on the things that are most aligned with your goals and objectives, the things that are going to get you from point A to point B, B to C, et cetera, et cetera. Do you find that when you talk about busy, that it carries some negative connotations as well?
All the time. So even my favorite books of all time say, stop saying about being good busy. And here I am, talking about being good, busy every single day. But the fact is, we are busy is not a bad word. We made it into a bad word, but it's absolutely not. It's very simple. Just go look in the synonyms, right? Busy means, for example, one of the synonym is being diligent, and diligence is not a bad word, right? So I think it's really, people don't ask enough questions in this world, right? We think busy is bad because somebody else said it, and so we just pick up on it and we just say, okay, I'm busy, but it's horrible. I have a story when I was not busy at work, and I can tell you that it's a million times worse than than being busy, because there is nothing you can do. The time is just completely wasted. And you literally, the minute you're bored and not busy at work, you lose all the self-worth, because you don't understand what you're doing here. You don't understand what you're doing with your life. And think for a moment of Maslow pyramid, right? So the top of the pyramid is the self-actualization rate. Self-actualization, it means that I am bringing value to somebody. The only way to bring value to someone is to work, is to produce that value. And to produce that value, you need to get busy. So whether you like work or not, it's better you start liking it if you want to get to the top of that pyramid and be a happy person. It's as simple as that.
That's excellent. I think it's interesting your reference to sports. We reference sports all the time here, and as you're just talking, one of the things that just kind of hit me that kind of ties to some of the things we've talked about is kind of the vision, right? So when you talk about like corporate America, you're just task jumping, right? And people get frustrated and burnt out and things like that, versus, in sports, it's so clear what you need to spend time on. And athletes invest in coaches and training and outside sources. But even with all of those things, they are so laser focused on what is going to help them in their outcome, versus I feel like sometimes a lot of times in business, and then even sometimes for people individually, if they're not athletes, they have no vision of their own lives. Right. So, one of the things I share with, a lot of people, to me, my vision is pretty clear. I want to be husband, father, business leader, community leader, in that order. Right. And that sounds really basic, but I think there's a lot of people that don't even think through that very basic lens of what actually is important to you. Now, there's probably people in a day that may say, well, it seems like other things take priorities over, being a husband and father at times. And well, yes, part of being a husband and father, there's also sacrifice that I have to do to provide and things like that. But if I was a terrible husband, an absent father, right, well, then everything else I did wouldn't matter either. And, everyone's kind of balance and within that might be different. But I feel like, just as you're talking, I think that's one of the beauties of the athletes is they have such clear vision as to exactly what they're trying to accomplish and exactly how they're going to get there.
I agree. And I think the difference is because they always have one goal, is to win. And the goal is very clear. And what happens in business, and this is also an example that I give a lot to people, is that in business, we confuse KPIs with goals. And the reason why people hustle, sorry if I use the word, I know it's not but they hustle in a bad way in corporate, is because they are going after the KPIs and they are not going after the goal. So when they get to the KPIs, they see that they haven't reached the goal. And so they get very disappointed, right? Demotivated. But it's because nobody explains. And look at I worked once where I received a dashboard for general managers with 35 KPIs, and I was asked to add 3 more. And I said, wow, what are they going to focus on? And good luck. I was, thankful I was not the general manager at the time. But this is the difference. Sports, they have very, very clear goal. It's there, right? Whether it's football, basketball, they know it. We got to win. That's all we have to do. They don't look at the KPIs. I always give example of tennis because I played tennis. So at the end, whether you win 6-0, 6-0 or 7-6, 6-7, 7-6, you won. That's the outcome, right? And the percentage of your serve, for example, is one of the tennis KPIs, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is the outcome. So if you take Nadal, Djokovic, Federer, they don't care if they, sort of achieved 100% of first serve, but they lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
But somehow in corporate, we confuse the two. And that's why when you look at the performance reviews, very often these are not goals. Very often these are KPIs.
Yes.
But to me,
That's
KPIs,
excellent.
I never understood why KPIs are key performance indicators. What performance do they indicate? For me, they are key pathways, right? Indicators. So they can show me whether I go this way or that way. And if I go that way, that will happen. But they don't tell me anything about my performance. So I don't know who invented that, but I sort of not sure about it.
That's a brilliant distinction, because we see it in our business as well, right? Like, I mean, it's funny you say that, because now I'm thinking about our own organization, and we certainly track goals and KPIs, and to your point, we instinctively know it, right? Like, there's plenty of, you can hit a KPI and not hit your goal.
Yeah, of course.
And I like your distinction about pathways versus performance, because to your point, obviously, if your serve percentage, right, if it's low, that might impact your ability to win. But at the end of the day, it's about winning or losing.
Exactly.
And so it might be a pathway to increase your chances of winning. But at the end of the day, there's lots of different ways to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also because in sports, athletes are more honest with themselves, right? There is nobody to blame. Especially, I mean, I don't believe in individual sports because there is no such thing. Even tennis for me is not an individual sports, but still there's nobody else to blame, right? It's all on them. And in corporate, it's very easy to point a finger at somebody else, right? So we kind of, there's this self-serving bias that we are prone to in corporate, when these are successes are my own, and failures, well, it's somebody else, right? When people talk about companies, they often say companies, but companies do not exist without people. So, right? So maybe if we just stop talking about companies in the third person and we start saying we, will get a little bit more accountable for what is happening in the company. And I'm not saying that you can, and you're responsible for everything and you can change everything. Absolutely not. But I believe in 80-20. And Brian Tracy says that, Pareto rule, whatever, 80% is internal. So it's all in us. It's really about our own decisions. Meetings do not happen on their own. Emails do not send on their own. So we need to be a little bit more honest, with ourselves. And when it comes to goals, it's the same. A lot of people confuse also goals with purposes. Purpose is not the same as a goal. You need to be very clear and realistic. The goals of most of the companies is to make money, right? Because even if you achieve the idea is that you make money to achieve the purpose, right? But the fact is, the goal is one. So we kind of are ashamed to say this, but people don't, start companies, it's either an own profit, okay, fine. But if it's a company, it's a company. You're here to, generate sales and create revenue, profit. That's it. So as soon as you start understanding this, you know that your goal needs to be to contribute to this. So if your sort of performance review, you see that you're not contributing to this, so you don't have a goal.
So, Kate, all of this is music to my ears. And I think about running a large company, and I can't help but think and feel that other people within the company would love to have a culture like this, and would love to have leaders who think like this and tell their employees, yeah, we want you to be good busy. We don't want you to just be bad busy. How do you help your leaders, your CEOs, your executives, really implement some of these ideologies that you're coaching?
I think many leaders today were absolutely not prepared to lead, me including. Before becoming a manager, I never received a training. It's sort of assumed people get promoted a lot because they achieve their objectives, their goals, or because they've been in the company for a very long time. Well, it's time to promote them because they're also sort of waiting for it. But it also happened to me that people didn't want to be managers, but they were promoted. And so that they take it because, of the reward. So we need to start this conversation with people before we offer this responsibility, because it is a responsibility. It is a reward, but it comes with an additional responsibility. And we need to prepare people ahead. Back to sports. No team allows, an athlete to go play without being prepared, without explaining the rules of the game, right? Without a proper training. But somehow we take that person and we throw them into the field and say, good luck, right? Lead us to success. So we need to invest in that preparation. And I think that a lot of, once again, we don't ask enough questions because we are scared. We are scared to admit, we don't have certain skills, right? Because immediately that is seen like weakness, and potentially then, I won't be promoted again. So, but the fact is we're not doing ourselves a favor again. So this is something that I've just understood about 6-7 years ago. I was actually blaming my company at that time for not offering me growth opportunities. And then I understood that it's not about the company. I needed to ask for my own growth opportunities. So what I've done, I sort of went to my company and I said, this is exactly what I want to learn, and this is how it's going to benefit the company. But if we don't ask, we are not going to get. So yeah, for me, preparation is key. They say 80%, 75%, whatever number you believe in. But the fact is that you need to really believe and invest in preparation. And we don't do that enough.
Yeah, both in ourselves and in our fellow team members.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes. It's the same as,
So Kate.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Kate, one of the questions I had, so one of the roles you had was really in client experience.
Yeah.
And one of the things when I think of like prioritization, so we're in a service business ourselves, and we have we refer to the client first mentality, right? Whatever we need to do to make the client happy and successful, and how can we support them best. But when we talk about prioritization and productivity, there's a balance there, right? Because a lot of times, if you're interacting with a customer, they might ask for lots of different things, and the helper in us just wants to do those things. When in reality, maybe the best thing we can do is not do some of those things and refocus the customer. So I'm curious in your being in a role of client experience, right, where you're trying to elevate that client experience, and kind of how did you balance that with productivity and prioritization and good busy?
Questions. So we don't ask enough questions. A lot of times when clients or whoever, even our colleagues, ask us to do things, we take and we do. We don't ask, what's the outcome? What is the reason you're asking? Who is this for? We simply do not ask enough questions. So when you start asking questions, very often a lot of tasks, they become unnecessary, because you understand that you've answered it in the past, or you already have the answer and you can send it in 2 seconds. So the interesting stat is that we are all born curious, and kids ask 4 times more questions than adults. So in a normal conversation, kids have about 80% of questions, and adults less than 25. And it's not that because they know less, it's because they simply want to know, but we don't want to know. Somehow we lose that, So we are curious about many other things, but somehow when the things are happening in the moment, we lose that curiosity. So the more questions we ask, the better busy we are.
And I think that's the hamster wheel, right? Like I think people don't ask questions because they feel they don't even have time to ask the question. Just I hear it consistently in lots of businesses. I mean, I probably should have asked the question up front, but we just got to get it done. It's like when you say that out loud, it just seems so obvious, but I think that's where people's minds get shifted.
But I think there's one other part with questions that's challenging is there's always going to be a small population of people that are intimidated or afraid to ask the question, because it could make them appear as though they're weak, or they don't know, or they should know, but they don't know. And then how's this going to make me look or feel in front of other people if I ask these questions? Because shouldn't I already know? I shouldn't have to ask these things. So how do you get past that? Because I have to imagine 20, 25% of the workforce is a little bit afraid to ask some questions.
Yeah, so I think there is a responsibility obviously on the manager here, but there is a tip that I can offer as well. So in terms of the responsibility on the manager, we talk a lot about psychological safety, right? But I think like purpose, psychological safety, we make it big immediately, and we try to sort of make something impossible and something that stands out. But for me, everything starts very, very small. So just think about familiarity, right? People feel safe with things that are familiar. So if manager created that familiarity by asking questions to them, to the team about them, and so they created that bond, no matter whether you're introvert, extrovert, whether you're afraid or not, you'll feel comfortable asking questions because you have that familiarity, you have that base. So you can just simply start small. And then the tip that I started using as well myself, that's after I started my coaching training, it's start the question with out of curiosity. So that doesn't make you sort of, you're not afraid that, oh, I'm weak or anything. It's just, I'm curious. I'm just naturally curious. And curiosity is a positive quality, right? So just out of curiosity, can I ask, so yeah.
That's excellent. So as you think of through the lens of our listeners, some of them might be in all different spectrums of good, busy, and productivity, and burnout and things like that. If there's one thing that they could take away, one change they could start tomorrow to just get them to refocus a little bit on what is the most important thing, how would you coach them to do that?
I think always start with the end in mind. I think this is the number one thing for anything. So a lot of people think of goals as something big or something that you mentioned earlier, vision, right? But goals can be very, very small, that can be micro goals. So for example, I am talking to you today. So what's my goal, right? I need to know what's the outcome for me. You obviously have yours, but I need to know what's the outcome for me. So the same. So whenever people start questioning themselves for every single task, what's the goal? They'll get there much, much faster because they know exactly where to go. They have that destination. When you don't have the destination, that's where the time extends because you don't know where you need to get. And even if you got there, you just simply don't know that you got there because you just don't know what success looks like, right?
Kate, I want to shift gears a little bit. You have these really awesome Good Busy playbooks on your website, which, by the way, listeners should go check out. You have one that really initially resonates with me. It's 33 Thinking Biases. And why it resonates with me is because Dustin and I are really big on mindset, and we talk to a lot of people about that. And I find so often that the cultures that maybe aren't where they need to be, or the productive employees, or productivity in a workforce is not where it needs to be. A lot of it, you can distill it down to one thing, and it's mindset. And sometimes it's negativity, sometimes it's other things. But can you talk a little bit about those thinking biases? Because I just feel that is so directly related to mindset.
Oh, I love that question. Thank you so much for asking this one. This was probably my favorite question until now. So I believe productivity is an inner game. It's not an outer game. And these are not my words. These are words of Timothy Galloway, who wrote the book, The Inner Game of Tennis. So a lot of times we think that we need systems and tools to fix productivity. But in reality, productivity is the outcome of our decisions. So everything happens in the mind, right? So earlier I mentioned about self-serving bias. That's the number one bias we have. And that's why I mentioned also the quote from Brian Tracy, 80% is internal, whereas 20% is external. So if you play the outer game, you're focusing on those 20%. And it's very hard to change other people and systems and everything, right? But it's, if you focus on the internal game, there's so much that is within your power and that you can change. So for me, self-serving bias, or there are so many of them. For example, the hedonic treadmill is something that you mentioned earlier. It's related to the hamster wheel, right? People are just, they don't have goals. So they are just going around. And even if they got there, they simply don't know. They can't recognize that because they don't know how success looks like. So for me now currently, and I'm going to announce the date of my course that I'm launching later this month, next week. But my course is not about systems. It's not about apps and sort of blueprints. It's all about biases. It's really all about how we think. Because the moment we understand our own thinking patterns, we can change them. It's very hard, sort of, we're complicated, algorithms. So, but we can. There are things that we can work with, right? So it's all about understanding how we work and sort of recognizing those patterns in ourselves first, and then in others, so that we can take better decisions, and then we can enjoy better outcomes. So definitely, mindset is, for me, mindset and productivity, they are linked.
I couldn't agree more.
Excellent.
Kate, you've got another one on how to win the email game. And
Yeah.
I've been doing this a little bit myself. I don't know if my process is the same as yours, but once a week, worst case scenario, every other week, I try to go through and clean out my inboxes, because when I start a new week, which let's call it Monday morning, I can sit down at my desk and I don't feel this burden, this anxiety on my shoulders where it's like, oh my gosh, I have all these emails from Friday. I have all these others buried that I probably missed a couple of things. So I like to declutter, because I know the first thing I can do is I can jump into a project, and I just have this more feeling of jubilation rather than this feeling of, oh boy, this is going to take a lot of work. It's Monday again. Which part of that's mindset, right? But I can prevent that mindset from ever creeping in because I'm more on top of my email game. Not always, but that helps me to be more productive. Tell me more about this, how to win the email game.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people think that winning the email game means to get your inbox to zero. I don't believe in that. Email will keep on coming. That's just a fact, accepted, right? That's just what it is. But I think initially in the workplace, once again, we lack training, because there is no communication system in the workplace. And I think it's very hard to develop one for their entire organization, especially if it's big. But you can develop at least one for your team. And so in many companies, I call them ping pong games, email ping pong games. Again, a little bit of analogy from sports. But a lot of people just talk using emails. They just ask one question at a time and stuff. And this game, I had a manager like this, and it can be 25 emails, with me in copy, my team talking to my manager. It drove me crazy, honestly. So I would just text my team, like, could you call? Just give her a call, right? The fact is that we need a system. So email is just a natural way for us to work, right? To communicate at work. But if it's important and urgent and it's in the moment, then it's a call or a WhatsApp message. I don't know, with my team, we'll use a lot of WhatsApp or DM, whatever system you use, right? But it can be an email. So for me, that's sort of the number one thing. Just design a system here, right? Because also understanding, coming from what you mentioned earlier, Chris, it brings you anxiety to see sort of the flood of emails, right? So it's because more is less. So there's the anxiety that is creeping. So how to reduce that? First of all, create the system. The second thing that a lot of people do is thank you emails. One word, thank you emails. But you already said thank you before. There's no need to say thank you every single time. We know we are very polite people, right? But if you look at the number of thank you emails that you have, you'll probably clean a lot of emails from your inbox. And the third one, I don't know if it's work related, but I find now, especially that I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs and stuff, these are sort of commercial emails. I don't know you, but I worked in CRM, so I don't give my email to any company because I know exactly what they do with it. So I don't subscribe to newsletters. Because now I'm on LinkedIn, so there are a few newsletters that I love reading. I am subscribed to those, but all the rest, it's out. And I constantly unsubscribe. So I don't know if that's the cleaning that you meant as well, but this is a lot of, a lot of people get, and I love my sister, for example, but we are two different individuals here. My emails now are, practically zero. My sisters are like 2000 something. Every time I look at her phone, just yeah. So
Yeah, I love everything you said there. I think that's phenomenal. And there are some really phenomenal leaders who are productive, but they're maybe one or two steps away from being where they want to be. And that could be the one thing that helps propel them to get that to that next level of joy. And I think that's phenomenal. Kate, last question as we wrap this up. What is one thing you would recommend everybody go do? We've got a lot of leaders who listen to the show. And what's one piece of advice you just say, this is what you should do?
coaching. A lot of people think that coaching is coaches fix you. Coaches do not fix you. Coaches are your thinking partners. And I think that I've done executive coaching in my life. I do peer coaching as well. I've done other types of coaching. I've done sports coaching. Coaches have this incredible ways of, they are like friends, but better, because they don't sugarcoat. They tell you things as they are, right? And they give you perspective that probably your friends are not able to give you, because they know you from a different angle, right? So for me, executive coaching literally changed my life. So I'm not saying that not everybody can pay an executive coach, but there are plenty of opportunities today. There are a lot of coaches that are looking for practice as well, so you can get sort of even free coaching as well. But I think this is an incredible way to work on your own mindset. As you mentioned earlier, mindset is very important, and build new skills. One of the skills is asking questions, because you'll see how the coach is asking questions. Second, how the coach listens, and you'll learn listening, and we know that's very important. And thirdly, you will make better decisions. So coaching is definitely the number one advice I would give to everyone.
I love that, because even if you're a leader, you're coaching your teammates, you're coaching the people who work for you, the people that work with you, and thinking partner. That I love that. I've never heard that before. And that should be what a coach is, rather than someone telling you what to do and how to do it. They're thinking with you, problem solving with you. Phenomenal.
Yeah, that's
Kate,
my mentor's
before
words.
we let you go,
Yeah.
I love that. Before we let you go, tell everybody what you've got going on and where they can find you.
So everybody can find me on LinkedIn. So this is where I spend most of my time today. So almost every day I post around 1 p.m. 1 p.m. London time. And I have my website, thegoodbusy.com. So you can sign up for my newsletter and get 5 free playbooks right away. And currently I'm working on my course, the Good Busy course for leaders. It will be focused mostly on the mindset. So how to ask questions and how to take better decisions. And that will be coming out soon. So I'm announcing the date next week.
Excellent.
Well, folks, you heard it. This was phenomenal. Go out there, check out these playbooks. I think, Kate, you've already added so much value to my day. And being that we're both big on mindset, it's a really nice to have a conversation with someone that has a slightly different perspective, but definitely aligns with it. And so many great nuggets. I want to go check out the tennis book as well that you mentioned, The Inner Game, because I've got a similar book myself, but it's about golf. So thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed it today. For all the listeners out there, we appreciate your ears, the downloads. Until next time, peace.
Thank you.